Okay, good morning, everyone. So, last class we were talking about this mutation theory of evolution, and there we had looked at different postulates or what were the hypotheses which were put forward, and we were then looking at the different types of criticism that was raised or objection against this theory by different scientists, and we had looked at these first four one, I guess. No, first three one, and then yeah, and then we will start from there. This second point on this slide. So this Inothera lamarckiana, like I mentioned yesterday, this is one of the species of primrose which was growing around this DeVries fellow, and he observed them and he found seven different species of it. As he had named those seven different species, but later on it was found that these species, they were not the homozygous plant, but rather they were hybrids of each other. Hybrid in the sense they were mixtures of two or more what we say plant characteristics and it was not the homozygous in terms of genotype. Had it been a genotype leading to the phenotype, and then different species they were uh, existed, but that was not the case, and that's when it was like considered as a hybrid. Now, why this point makes an objection? Because the DeVries theory of mutation, it was based on most of his observation from these seven or eight different varieties of Inothera, and that's when if that hypothesis or the basis of the theory itself is wrong, theory may not be so correct. So that was one objection that was raised in terms of this plant. And the last point in the objection was most mutations, they are recessive and hence not expressed, but their utility for progeny cannot be determined. So we know already that not every mutation will get expressed. There will be certain mutations which are within the recessive alleles, they will not get expressed, right? And the use of that particular mutation, whether it's useful or harmful or neutral or whatsoever, that will only be assessed when that expression of that allele occurs. If that expression does not occur, then that mutation utility or the use of that mutation cannot be determined. So there, what is the purpose of having it in recessive gene? That was also not explained by this mutation theory. So these were different objections. So based on that, then these guys again, they explained a newer version of theory, what we call as modern theory of mutation, which speaks of the germinal mutation in germ cells. They are heritable and they help in evolution, not every other mutation. Also, in case of somatic cells, the earlier theory does not distinguish between that. It just like every mutation can, that's what the point was. Every mutation, sorry, here it is. Yeah, uh, somewhere I forgot now. Yeah, it's somewhere there which talks of that the mutations, they have, yeah, here it is, inherent tendency to change or mutate, and that is like all over the organism or all the cells within the organism. Now that is what leads to the accumulation, and then it leads to the change in certain characteristics. So that was the uh, point of view of the DeVries theory. But in modern theory, it specifically contained that particular mutation part, which leads to the evolution to the germinal mutation, that is in the germ cells, and of course then they are heritable. Various agents that introduce mutations, they are called as mutagens, and this is where all those factors that we were talking of yesterday, they are being considered here. They are called as mutagens. They can be physical, chemical, biological, any of those factors. They are collectively called as mutagens, which leads to the mutation. This point is additional in terms of mutation can be dominant or recessive. If it is dominant, we'll see its expression pattern. If it is recessive, we may not see its expression pattern in the same generation. Rather, we'll see it in subsequent generation where it is homozygous recessive. And again, this point is same, like can be useful, harmful, or neutral. And one more additional point it has been added is mutations of various magnitudes. That what does this mean is like not every change in the mutation will generate the similar effect. The effects can be drastic or can be very mild depending on what that mutation is about. Like simplest example we know of is that of sickle cell anemia. It happens because of certain changes in the hemoglobin protein, and that's a very specific amino acid which gets changed. Now, if that amino acid is changed, then rather that because of the mutation amino acid gets changed, and because of which the sickle cell anemia occurs. But if there is any other amino acid which changes, it may not lead to sickle cell anemia. So that is the difference between the various magnitudes. Both are mutation. One is at what we call as conserved site. That means it is very important part of the protein. And the other mutation can be anywhere else apart from this conserved site, which may not lead to the sickle cell anemia. So that way, both these mutations, they can lead to effects of various magnitudes. So that point was added in the modern theory of mutation. And the next point is the mutations from raw material. It forms the raw material for evolution, but alone they cannot produce new species. And this is exactly was one of the major drawback, and this is what we are discussing as well, that it alone cannot form new species. That particular species has to adapt to the new situation, which will further lead to certain changes in the cells, and that changes may or may not directly translate into the genetic changes, right, or hereditary changes. So that is how a particular like this modern theory of mutation speaks of. And again, these points which I have mentioned here, these are in addition to those general points which has been mentioned earlier. So these are the main points from this modern theory of mutation. Any question here? Okay, so then we will move on to the next part. So this was so according to that neo-Darwinism, this mutation theory was one part of this whole of theory of evolution. Now the next point which needs to be explained is how is this mechanism of evolution has occurred? Like what were those different changes throughout the species that has been happening, and that becomes the mechanism. So that's when this modern synthetic theory of evolution comes into picture. So, and this is one of the quite classical theory, classical in the sense very widely accepted without much of its any changes or objection, because this has been very well studied. And of course, these are like recent time studies, like maybe around 50s or 60s. And that's when these studies, they are far more applicable. So according to this theory, the unit of evolution is not an individual, but the population of a species. Now, when we speak, and that's when again when we are talking of if the evolution is happening within an individual, mutation is happening within an individual, it may or may not translate to the new species, right? Or it may not lead to the process of evolution because of several factors. That individual may not reproduce, that may not produce the gametes which contains the mutation, and so on, right? But when it is a population which is affected by similar mutation, rather same mutation, and most of the population has it, that particular mutation, or if it is changing over the time due to different factors, then that will lead to the evolution for sure. So that is one of the very, very important hypothesis of this particular modern synthetic theory of evolution. And we will see in the next few slides how does the particular population, when they have differently affected genes, how do they help in the process of evolution. So we look at whole of that mechanism. So it is the gene pool of the population that changes and then evolves and then diversifies. So it's not the individual genes, rather it's the gene pool of the population. That means, let's say we are like a kind of population, and each one of us, due to certain environmental factors, whatever they are, our genetic makeup is changing, or certain adaptation, the genetic makeup is changing, or certain mutation, there are changes happening in the hereditary material. So that is like changes in the gene of the population and not the individual itself. And that's what will lead to the evolution and then diversification. Diversification is another phenomena which we know of, like uh, two individual species living in two different situations, how they adapt to their surroundings. That's what leads to diversification. And if their population again undergoes evolution, that will lead to different species altogether. So this is the second point. Now, natural selection, which was explained by Darwinism, it operates not on the genome of an individual of a species, but on the gene pool of the population, and this was called as population genetics. So this population genetics concept is one of the very strong pillars of this modern synthetic theory of evolution, which talks of that it is not the individual genome which changes, or that does not lead to evolution, rather it's the gene pool of the population, and that's what is called as population genetics. That means study of the genetics of the population rather than individual. And the evolution, which is the result of changes in the genes and the gene combinations in the organism, is called as Mendelian population. That means whatever that population is there, and it is leading to certain changes in the genes, again because of whatever reasons, individual changes, but within a population, most of the individuals, they have that those particular changes within their genes or gene recombinations, and that leading to the process of evolution. So that population is referred to as Mendelian population, because Mendel has established that genetic, what we say, the results of that genetic studies in terms of how the heredity occurs from one generation to other. How does it get transferred, that 1 has to 3, sorry, 3 has to 1 in terms of phenotype, or 1 has to 2 has to 1 in terms of genotype ratio. So that is a part of that whole population. So that is included in this modern theory of synthetic theory of evolution. So a group of all those organisms or individuals that live in a geographical area at a particular time and interbreed freely. Interbreed freely means within that species, they are interbreeding freely. They are present at one particular time point. They are present at one particular space, and that is what is Mendelian population. So, of course, when certain factors are common to a species or a population of a species at one time point within one particular species, that will lead to similar changes, that becomes Mendelian population, and that will ultimately be studied as the population genetics. So, and the gene pool, if you have to define, it's the total number of individuals of the population that constitutes the gene pool. It's not the as such the individuals, but rather their genetic makeup. That's what is individuals here. Individual does not mean one particular uh, organism. Of course it does, but then one particular organism has one specific genetic makeup, and that's when there are like many number of these individuals, there will be many number of genetic makeups, and that together will be called as gene pool. So this was the basis of this modern theory of like modern synthetic theory of evolution. Now, now to explain this phenomena, that how does this certain Mendelian population evolves, there was this Hardy-Weinberg principle of equilibrium. Now, there were these two guys, Hardy and Weinberg, in 1908. They independently proposed this theory of or principle of equilibrium. Equilibrium, it refers to the equilibrium of the population. Yeah, We will come to that. So this theory or this principle, it describes the relationship of gene frequencies. We will see what gene frequencies and the genotype frequencies of the alleles in the gene pool of the population. So let's look at these two concepts first, and then we'll come back to the statement. So gene frequency is the proportion of an allele in relation to the total alleles of a gene. So for example, we have different types of skin color, right? And there are various alleles for this skin color, which we had seen earlier, that multiple alleles type of example. Now if it is multiple type, so this is like a proportion of an allele. Let's say either white allele, means the skin, gene type coding for white skin, compared to all the other alleles, how much is that proportion, or any other allele for that matter. We can even take a completely dark skin genotype, and what is the proportion of that allele in whole population of that skin color alleles. That is called as gene frequency, and this is present in a randomly interbreeding population, that is Mendelian population it is talking. Whenever it says randomly interbreeding, it means this is within the species. It is not outside the species, like a human and lion can't interbreed. It's only human and lion can interbreed with each other, right? It's not across the species. So that is when randomly interbreeding, that means Mendelian population. So that is, and the proportion of that one particular allele within that whole total number of alleles, that will be called as gene frequency. And this is somehow similar to the phenotype ratio in a way, because phenotype ultimately give rise to the is because of the genotype. So we know what is the gene frequency of that particular allele there. And genotype frequency is the proportion of one kind of genotype from a population with respect to the locus under consideration. Kind of genotype, that means both the alleles together, that is the genotype, right? It can be homozygous, heterozygous, it can be homozygous dominant or homozygous recessive. That will be a genotype of that particular individual. So considering all that, the proportion of one particular genotype, so when we speak of monohybrid cross ratio of genotype, we say 1:2:1. So capital A, that is homozygous dominant, as to 2 of heterozygous dominant, that is capital A small a, as to 1 homozygous recessive, that is small a small a. So when we know this 1:2:1, and if we take one of it and then we can put into a ratio format, that becomes genotype frequency. So genotype frequency is actually calculated by dividing the number of individuals with one genotype in a population by the total number of individuals in that population. So if you want to study, let's say how many people have homozygous dominant, we'll calculate or we will count their number, divide by the total number of population having that particular genotype. That particular genotype in the sense homozygous, heterozygous, dominant, recessive, all of it together. So that will be genotype frequency. And this relation between gene frequency, that is the proportion of allele to the proportion of genotype, that is what is explained by this principle of equilibrium by Hardy and Weinberg fellow. So now the statement says, if the evolutionary forces, now if you look carefully how the theory evolved or how the theory became more and more applicable, now they started using terms like evolutionary forces, which includes mutation, which includes natural selection, adaptation, all of those things. So if the evolutionary forces are not operating, it's saying not operating, that means there is no changes happening in that particular species on a large and randomly mating population. Again, randomly mating is interbreeding population, randomly interbreeding, which is also called at times as panmictic. Panmetic was one of the scientists has used this term for that particular population, like how Mendel, like the population was called as Mendelian population. It is also called as panmictic population. So that randomly meet interbreeding population, if that does not have any effect, or it is not getting operated or affected by the evolutionary forces, the relative frequencies of various alleles in that population, they tend to remain at equilibrium or constant generation after generation, which is very obvious. If you think constantly, like let's say there is one village. Within that one village there are no forces, no evolutionary forces, no mutation happening, no adaptation happening, no natural selection, nothing, right? No evolutionary forces are acting, which is an ideal situation, which may or may not happen in general. But the principle says, if there are no evolutionary forces acting on such a population and they are interbreeding, that means they are giving rise to generations after generation. So within whole of this population across different generation, the relative frequency of various alleles, then whether it's let's say if we talk again of skin color, a dark skin or a different skin shades or a white skin, any of these, the proportion or the relative frequencies of these alleles in that particular population, it will tend to remain at an equilibrium or almost constant even generation after generation. So that was the principle given by this Hardy and Weinberg. Now the logic behind that is kind of explained here. So if a gene frequency in a population remains constant, that means that particular genetic makeup is not changing within the generation. So the population is static and is not evolving, right? In other words, if it has to change, so the gene frequencies, they keep changing in population which is evolving. If the population is evolving, gene frequencies will change. If the population is not evolving, the gene frequencies will not change or they will remain constant. So that is when you can imagine now, if you go back to the same principle, if a particular genotype is expressed more, let's say all the skin colors, let's say the dark skin color is going, it's not getting expressed in any of the individuals, and majority of the white or any of the skin color is getting expressed more. Now in that whole of the gene population, what we will get at the end is the extinction of that white genotype, sorry, black genotype, right? Total dark genotype. So if that keeps on happening, at the end the population will evolve in certain direction. So that's what this principle of equilibrium is talking about. Now this is same thing is explained in a little mathematical way, which is shown on this slide. So if it is a Mendelian population, and if we denote gene frequency of a gene A, that is that allele is dominant, so that's why capital A. If we consider that gene frequency as small p, and the gene frequency of the other allele, that is small recessive allele small a, is q, then the sum of these alleles, that is total frequency of gene, is a plus a, capital A plus small a, it becomes p plus q, and that is always 1 in the sense in totality it is 1. And now if you consider the proportion or the frequency of these genotypes, like what is the extent that these genotypes can get expressed, it will only happen when you multiply it with male and female, right? That is the crossing. So from male one gamete, from female one gamete. So what is the proportion and what is the frequency with which that crossing can occur is given by p plus q square, because p plus q was one allele, right? That is the proportion or the gene frequency of this genotype. And when the crossing happens, this will be multiplied by the similar frequency from the other individual. So that is y square. And it is 1 square, so which remains 1. And if you expand this, we know this mathematical expression, p square plus 2pq plus q square is equal to 1. Now, out of this, the frequency of capital A, that is homozygous dominant, is p square, that will be given by this number. The genotype frequency of small a, that is homozygous recessive, will be given by q square, and the genotype frequency of heterozygous dominant will be given by 2pq. Now, whatever is the number, let's say gene frequency of a gene is 10, and the gene frequency of small a, that is recessive allele, is 2. Then what we get, let's say we want to find the genotype frequency of recessive allele. So it will become 2 square, or genotype frequency of dominant homozygous dominant will become 10 square. So that way, I'm just giving hypothetical example, but depending on what is the gene frequency, we can actually calculate the genotype frequency. So that is the Hardy-Weinberg principle of equilibrium. Any questions here? Anyone?
This is only ideal, right? This doesn't happen in real life.
Sorry?
So this is only ideal, right? This doesn't happen in real life.
No, it does happen in real life. No, why not?
So is it possible that a population, it doesn't mutate?
No, then you miss this part. In other words, the gene frequencies, they keep changing in a population which is evolving. That's why I have highlighted as well. We are evolving population, we consider it so. That means the gene frequencies, they are changing.
Yes,
So
but in this, they said that if there's no mutations and if there is no natural selection, that then the gene,
that is the condition. If there is no evolutionary force, but it is not.
That's the principle, right? So this principle is only in theory.
No, how it is in theory? It's very clearly saying, if at all there are, it's that's what it says. In other words, it comes to this part, right? The gene frequency. Now we know that there are many evolutionary forces that are acting, right?
Yes.
So when the evolutionary forces are acting, the gene frequencies, they will keep changing, and that's how the population will be evolving. That's the direct implication of this principle. So
Okay.
it's not theoretical. It's very much operating.
Okay.
That was just one way that they have put forward. Otherwise, the statement is very much clear. Now, so just few points. So according to this principle, now if a population is large, its individuals have random mating. That's quite obvious. Like we know now human population is large, and random mating or random marriages, they do happen across the population, right? So and the chance that this population genetics getting changed over the time is quite obvious, because that random interbreeding is happening. Earlier days, you would know of, like let's say 100 years back, mostly the marriages used to happen in the nearby villages or people of known. Now the marriages even happen across the countries, right? So that way, if you look at this particular trend, though it is not a very long time to observe, but within just 100 years or even last 50 years, this trend has been shifting. So that way the population genetic is obviously going to change. Each parent produces roughly equal number of gametes. This we already know. We have studied in the reproduction part. And equal number of gametes in the sense that both these alleles, whatever we are talking of in terms of either capital A or small a, they will be produced in equal number, if at all, I mean, depending on whichever is present. And these gametes, they will combine at random, undergo no evolutionary change. Of course, once the gamete formation happens, there is almost negligible chance that they will undergo any evolutionary changes, right? And then the gene or allele frequency of different genes, that will remain constant. or unchanged. So that means whatever is coming from parent to the next generation, that frequency of gene will remain constant, and the genetic equilibrium of these genes is preserved throughout the generation. So that way, this equilibrium is maintained over the time, and that's when this Mendelian, what we say, the laws, they play very important role in this, because they clearly mention how the alleles are getting transferred to next generation, whether in a monohybrid cross or a dihybrid cross or so on. That is very clearly given by Mendel. So that's where whole of this part is very much applicable. Then, so what are those different evolutionary forces that this principle was talking about? So, or these Hardy and Weinberg fellows, they were talking about. So they were specifically talking of these 4 factors which affect the gene equilibrium in a population. That first one is the genetic variation. This whole of this genetic variation we have studied in the earlier chapter of inheritance. Second is reproductive isolation, genetic drift, or it is also called a Sewell Wright effect in small population. That means changes in the small population, how does it affect ultimately the large population? So that is one hypothesis. And natural selection in large population and the speciation itself. So these 4 main factors, these are the evolutionary forces, or these are the factors which affect the gene equilibrium in a population. So we'll look at again one by one all these 4, and this will also in a way include that modern synthetic theory of evolution or theory of evolution in general. This will cover all of these points at one go. So in genetic variation in a population, we had seen mutations, either genetic mutation or what are also called as point mutation. It includes 2 types, frame shift and substitution. Now this will be a quick revision. Frame shift is something like changes of the codon sequence. Like if it is ABC, ABC, DEF and so on. If you remove A or something happens by addition or deletion, then the frame shift changes to BCD and so on, right? So that way it's change of the codon sequence, and substitution is replacing a certain nucleotide with the other nucleotide. That was substitution mutation. Because of this, the genetic variation might occur in a population. And again, this is not talking that it will always occur. It may or may not happen because the mutation may or may not be significant. Recombination of genes, again these points we have seen. Dual parentage, that means half genome comes from mother, half genome comes from father. That's what is dual parentage. Like an individual offspring belongs to that dual parentage. Independent assortment of homologous chromosome during the gamete formation process. The separation of one particular character is independent of the another character, and that's when those alleles will separate independently. That's what is independent assortment. Crossing over during the meiosis, we saw that crossing over happens between the homologous chromosomes, that chiasmata formation and so on. Random fusion, again we don't know which gamete will fuse with which gamete from male to female, so that's again a random fusion. That's where the recombination of genes can occur. Next one, chromosomal mutation. We have seen, apart from the genetic mutations which are point mutation, there can be many chromosomal mutations. Either it can be change in number of genes, or it can be change in the arrangement of the genes. Number of genes was particular gene being deleted or becoming deficient or so, or getting duplicated. We have seen all of these phenomena very well in detail, so I won't go in detail there. Changes in the arrangement of the genes, inversion. If you remember that 180-degree transition of particular gene locus, right? So if the gene sequence like gene A, gene B, gene C and so on, you remember we had seen EDC. That becomes, so instead of A, B, C, D, E, it becomes A, B, E, D, C. That sequence itself flip over, 180-degree transition of the gene sequence. that is inversion. Translocation, again, this also we have seen in detail, a particular gene sequence, what we are looking at, that Morgan studies, a particular gene locus during the meiosis process, it gets crossed over with something else, so it changes the position. So that is the like linkage and stuff, what we have studied, linkage and mapping of the genes and so on. So that is kind of translocation. It can also be changes in the total number of chromosome, what we call as ploidy or heteroploidy, and it will involve either in the total number of or entire set of chromosome, either changes in the haploidy or polyploidy. It can lead to either of these situation, or the changes involving the number of chromosomes in one set. One set as in only, let's say, chromosome number 1 getting affected, or chromosome 3 getting affected, and so on. And they can be of monosomic, which is 2n minus 1, that is total number minus 1 chromosome, or 2n plus 1, which is total number plus 1, or even plus 1 plus 1, that is additional 2 chromosome. And it can be even mixture, 2n minus A and plus B. That means one chromosome is getting duplicated, other chromosome is getting deleted. So that way, this ploidy can be of different types. Hybridization, again, that whole perspective of crossing between two different species, not different species, within a species, different from different population, right? That is hybridization. Like a white man marrying to a Indian woman, that's hybridization kind of thing, because the genetic makeups, they are drastically different, and that is what leads to the variation. And also migration or the gene flow. And again, because of the similar hybridization processes, there is migration of particular gene flow. In the simplest sense, what I can say is, let's say, if we go and settle down in USA or Europe, we are, and let's say we get married to those local people there, or they get married to people in India, that's like a gene flow. A particular genetic makeup is getting transmitted across the generation by the process of hybridization. So this was the first point of the genetic variation in the population, which we just speak of from the evolutionary process. I hope this is fine with everyone. You will have to go back to that particular chapter and revise this concept, but in a way we kind of revised it here quite briefly. Any question here? Now, I just want to say one point which I need to look at, in the sense that, because where is it? Yeah, so this second point, I haven't mentioned it on this slide because it's relatively very small one. Reproductive isolation, it talks of like how one particular species has isolated itself from the other species in terms of process of reproduction. That's what is reproductive isolation. That means one species cannot interbreed with the other species, though you might have an exceptions there, like that Zenki or mule or Komato, right? That these are exceptions. But in general, the reproductive isolation is one of the very strong evolutionary forces. Now, how is it evolutionary forces? Let's say a particular we can speak in the context of human itself. Like human species cannot interbreed with any other animal species. Now, if that would have been the case, the whatever evolutionary changes are happening in the human, they will get diluted if they start interbreeding with the other species, and that particular process of evolution will take, maybe, I don't know, or it may not even happen, right? So that particular evolution phase, literally needs reproductive isolation. That means if a particular mutation or particular change is happening in the population, Mendelian population, that change or that whatever effect it is there due to these evolutionary forces stays within the species, and there is a higher chance that that species will evolve faster. So that is what is the reproductive isolation. In short, what it means is the isolation of the reproductive capabilities of one particular species, and that is acting as one more evolutionary force, or rather a stronger evolutionary force, because of the interbreeding within the Mendelian population and not outside that population. So that is reproductive isolation. I hope that is clear. It's the simplest words. It's nothing much there to explain. Then we will, what time is it? We'll look at the third point. Okay, let's go through the at least first few slides of this genetic drift or civil right effect. So this effect is specifically talking of the small population, right? So in a small population, gene frequency or allele frequency exhibits great fluctuations generation after generation, which is quite obvious. It's like, you have certain change within 1,000 and you have certain change within million. Obviously, the change in 1,000 is more fluctuating than the one in million. I'm just giving you again random example, but mathematically, I hope that part is clear. So within small population, the gene frequency or allele frequency will exhibit a lot of fluctuations throughout the generation. So due to that particular aspect, this guy, Sewall Wright, he found that the allele frequencies in the small interbreeding population, they are non-directional. Non-directional in the sense, they are not going towards the one direction of evolution, and that's when it is said non-direction, and they fluctuate purely by chance. There is not much of a logic that why it is going in this direction or why it is going in another direction in terms of evolution when we talk of direction. So that is fluctuating a lot, and that is what and that fluctuation is also by a random chance. It is not uh, it is not pre-decided. So the sudden and random changes in the allele frequency occurring in the small population by chance alone, they are called as genetic drifts. Drifts in the sense change. So the genetic changes, but changes which leads to a particular direction. So that is what is drift. We call this drift in terms of water flow. When the river path is changed, we call it as a river drift, right? Something like that. So this is like a genetic drift. A particular genetic population changing its allelic frequency. Let's say the population was homozygous dominant and it is changing to the heterozygous dominant one, from capital A to capital A small a. And it has no reason. It is merely by chance. Could be because of certain people were getting married to only certain type of people, right? Or the interbreeding was happening only with specific individuals. So these are like random examples, but they lead to genetic drift, or it is also called as Sewall Wright effect. So according to this concept, the mutations arising in a small population may be either fixed or they are lost. How it is fixed or lost? Because if the kind of interbreeding is happening within that small population and it's the specific individuals, then obviously it is going to remain fixed. But if it is too random, then that particular mutation will be lost, and this will again just by chance. It is not 100% sure. If the chance is there, then it's like a probability equation. If it is this situation, then something like that will happen. So that's like relative terminology. And this is irrespective of the mutation being beneficial or harmful. It can either remain fixed or it can get lost just by mere chance. And it doesn't matter whether it's a beneficial or harmful mutation. So that's when, to explain this phenomena, there were these two concepts which were developed later. First one is called as bottleneck phenomena. Bottleneck, I guess you would know this word. Bottleneck is kind of difficulty or barrier or hindrance, right? So that is bottleneck. It's like how a bottle is there and the neck is kind of squeezed in, which acts as a kind of force not to let go of the content inside the bottle. So that's like literal meaning, bottleneck. Or it is also called as sampling error. And the second one is called as founder's effect. So these are the two phenomena or effects which are responsible for this genetic drift. So for today, I guess we will stop here. We will talk of the sampling error and the bottleneck or the bottleneck effect and the founder's effect in the next class. This is merely a simpler examples what these are. So any questions so far?